the police to be reined in so that they solve real crime instead of committing crime. They're not going to stop themselves. The mayors aren't going to stop them. The good judges alone aren't going to stop them. That's something that we have to do. I'm going to talk about a couple of ways I think we can really look at to accomplish that here tonight. The first thing I want to talk about is a civilian review board that is independent of the police department and has the power and authority to really hold police accountable and to take them off the force and out of the job if they don't protect us instead of maiming and murdering and abusing people. There's a parallel struggle that goes along with things like fighting for a civilian review board, and that is we're also opposing things like police and government spying, infiltration, harassment, intimidation, disruption tactics, provocateurism, and everything else that they use to try to keep us from organizing effectively to bring them under control or to bring about the kind of changes that we really want to see in this world. In other words, while we're fighting for the changes, we have to fight for the right to fight for the changes. And these things are very linked. Marianne mentioned that one of the cases that we did was protecting the anonymity of donors to a public campaign to Freedom Socialist Party candidates. And interestingly and ironically, one of the kind of evidence that you have to use to prove that is how much you've been harassed and abused and spied on by the police. And Freedom Socialist Party, Radical Women, our organizations have, and many other organizations have, and everybody cooperated a lot to give us mountains of this kind of evidence in order to win our exemptions. But I would rather not have to have that evidence continue to pile up. The Civilian Review Board is not a panacea in and of itself, but it is a very strong reform that has the potential to give us some breathing space to do a lot of that organizing. The FSP believes that the capitalist system that we live in, that produces police abuse, discrimination, economic inequality, homelessness, and everything else, ultimately has to be changed from the bottom up and replaced with a socialist system that is truly democratic and values human life and meets human needs. Between now and the time when a majority of the people on this earth actually come together to make that change, we need to demand the reforms that allow us to survive and keep on working towards that fundamental change. And that's where something like a Civilian Review Board can come in. After Robert Reese was murdered, as Glenn just talked about, a Central Area Committee for Civil Rights was formed and started calling for a Civilian Review Board. Actually, it needs to have full investigatory powers. It needs to subpoena people, get documents, see everything. It has to have protection for whistleblowers. There are people, cops and people in the system who don't like it, but they don't dare cross it for fear of their jobs or their lives a lot of the time, and so forth. None of these things will completely eliminate police abuse, but they will certainly go a long way to giving us the room to continue to organize against them until we can get that critical mass together to really change society and make this the kind of world we all want it to be. With respect to the police spying and intimidation and all those forms of abuse, we've seen a tremendous increase in that lately. Recently in the Chicago and Minneapolis area, the FBI has been raiding the homes of a very small socialist organization called Freedom Socialist Organization, and then some independent activists in those cities who were standing up for people's rights in Colombia, where people who opposed the labor movement have taken something like 1,500 labor organizers and killed them, many times dropping them out of helicopters, and also trying to fight for the rights of Palestinian people in that part of the world, and ransacked their houses, hauled them all in, subpoenaed them before grand juries. And I think the system thought, well, we've got a small group and a few independent grandmothers and people up here in the Midwest, and we're going to get this thing rolling. Well, those people didn't cave. They stood together. Every one of them said no. The National Lawyers Guild brought in lawyers from all over the country, and they withdrew all the subpoenas. Now, 3 people have been subpoenaed again, and these things are never over. But that kind of solidarity and that kind of response is what it takes to make that room so that we can do the other organizing. Out of the 1970s, after the COINTELPRO decimated the Black Panther Party, the American Indian Movement, went after all the left groups, Central America, support activists, and you name it. A lot of that exposure led to some really good reforms for a while. The city of Seattle had an ordinance against police spying, and many other cities did as well, and there was federal legislation too. But then came the WTO, and shortly after that 9/11, and as we've seen, all of that has been reversed, and we're back to more spying, harassing than ever. I believe in the year 2010, the government has spent $80 billion on spy activities, $27 billion of it on military spy activities, and $53.1 billion on non-military intelligence. And we don't need to have just the police and the FBI, ICE, and Homeland Security and military police doing it these days. We also have all these private contractors that are out now doing it. In some places they're not doing it well, but they're out doing it and making lots of money. And so, again, we have to stand up to that. We have to fight it locally. Some university police infiltrated the organizations of students and janitors and people who were fighting budget cuts at the university last year. That was finally exposed. And our good friends and colleagues in Olympia report militarization, who were putting their bodies in front of tanks going to and from Iraq recently, learned that among their ranks, someone who they thought was a good friend was actually a military cop, taking down everything and telling the authorities everything that they were doing. So it can happen anywhere and everywhere, and does. These grand juries that are used are very undemocratic. The grand jury idea itself was a reform at the time of the Constitution in this country to set a group of ordinary people to be in between the government and the prosecutor in terms of charging people with major crimes. And they had to present, their prosecutors had to present what they had to a group of people, at that time citizens and whatever, and they had to make the decision whether an indictment would happen or not. That system still happens in the federal system today, and within some of the aspects of the criminal system, it has some positive effects, but it has been massively abused, and because it is a fairly secret proceeding, people can't have lawyers represent them in there. The jurors are not vetted or selected, they're just called in and they're there. If you refuse to answer a question, you could be held in contempt and put in jail for the life of the grand jury. Usually they last 18 months, so if they get you early on, it's a fairly long time away from home. And a lot of organizations have fought and organized to try to end grand jury abuse, and there's much work to be done on that front as well, and we're going to see the opportunity to do more and more of it. There's a local organization that is formed here that is having an event next Friday night. Get that leaflet up here with me. Just do something with it. There are leaflets here about
I've got them here.
Event, and it's going to be next Friday night at the American Friends Center. Pick up a leaflet and go with them. Neil Fox, who's a local criminal attorney, will be speaking along with others, and it'll be a chance to really learn how this system works and how we can fight it. The committee that's formed is also setting up a rapid response network so that if people are hassled here, get called in, have their houses raided or anything like that, there will be immediate organization and ability to become involved in that. So I would encourage people to sign up for that and know that that's there. The National Lawyers Guild has a national hotline for people to call, and once again, there are things happening that will help people fight for their rights. The event next week is at 6:30, and it's www.fbi.net if you want to find out a lot more information about that. There are many great websites. ACLU has a lot. You can find out about this history and what our rights are and aren't, and how to respond. One thing we don't want to do when the police come is tell them anything. They get real sneaky and friendly, And you think if you're saying a negative or telling them about something that's not happening, you're okay. But all that does is tell them that, well, now we go look someplace else for this other person, or we tie it all together. So we need to stand in solidarity, stand up for each other, helping out each other in all of the battles and all of the fronts that it's going to take for us to make the changes that we need to make. But I want to see us go all the way this time. I don't want to see these things stop. Let's get longer and longer, and years go by, and we come back to another meeting. I hope this is the last one. Thank you all.